The 18-wheeler shuddered against the wind as Miguel Santos downshifted, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel. Rain hammered the windshield in sheets, each lightning flash illuminating the treacherous stretch of Interstate 35 through central Texas. He had driven this route countless times over 15 years, but tonight felt different. Wrong. The red and blue lights appeared first as distant smears through the storm, growing brighter as Miguel approached the accident scene. Two cars had collided head-on, their twisted metal frames blocking the right lane. Emergency vehicles clustered around the wreckage like moths around a flame. Miguel pulled his rig onto the shoulder, emergency flashers cutting through the darkness. He should have kept driving. 23 years of trucking had taught him that much. But something made him kill the engine and step into the storm. That was when he saw her. The statue lay half buried in the ditch beside the highway, thrown clear from one of the vehicles. Our Lady of Aparecida, Brazil's patron saint, her dark wooden face serene despite the chaos surrounding her. Miguel knew the image well from his childhood, though he had not thought of her in years. The statue's base was cracked, her blue mantle chipped, but her eyes seemed to look directly at him through the rain. A paramedic jogged past, shouting orders. No one else had noticed the statue. Miguel stood frozen, water streaming down his face, staring at the broken figure that had somehow survived when metal and glass had not. Miguel lifted the statue carefully, surprised by its weight. The broken base felt warm against his palms despite the cold rain, as if heat radiated from within the wood itself. He wrapped her in an old blanket from his sleeper cab and secured her on the passenger seat, uncertain why he felt compelled to save a piece of religious art he no longer believed in. The engine turned over on the first try, unusual for a truck that typically protested in weather like this. Miguel pulled back onto the highway, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the storm. Miles passed in silence until his CB radio crackled to life. Ave Maria, Grazia Plena, came a woman's voice, soft and melodic through the static. Miguel grabbed the handset. Come again, driver. Nothing but white noise answered him. He checked his channel, switched frequencies, but found only empty air. The voice had been speaking Latin, he realized, a prayer his grandmother used to whisper. 20 miles down the road, his fuel gauge began climbing. Impossible. He had filled up in Dallas, with barely a quarter tank remaining, yet now the needle pointed to 3/4 full. Miguel pulled over at the next truck stop, flashlight in hand, and circled his rig in the rain. No fuel leaks. No explanation. Back in the cab, he stared at the statue. Her wooden features seemed softer somehow, more alive than carved, which should appear. The warmth emanating from the blanket had intensified, filling the entire cab with comfortable heat that a struggling heater could never produce. If stories like this move you and you believe in moments where faith meets the unexplainable, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will challenge everything Miguel thought he knew about the world. Miguel's GPS began malfunctioning 50 miles outside Austin. The screen flickered between routes, then settled on a path he had never taken. Highway 183 to Farm Road 969, cutting east through small towns instead of his usual interstate route to Houston. He reached for the unit to reset it, but his hand stopped midway. The statue's warmth pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. Miguel found himself following the strange directions without understanding why. The detour took him through Elgin, then southeast toward Bastrop. Rain continued falling, but lighter now, more like tears than the earlier deluge. His CB remained silent except for occasional bursts of that same mysterious voice, always in Latin, always just beyond comprehension. At 2:47 a.m., Miguel's phone rang. His dispatcher's panicked voice cut through the cab's quiet. Santos, where the hell are you? Interstate 35 just got hit by a chemical spill truck. Jackknifed, right where you should have been 20 minutes ago. Highways closed, hazmat crews everywhere. 3 drivers hospitalized. Miguel's blood chilled. He pulled over, hands shaking as he calculated times and distances. If he had stayed on his regular route, if his GPS had not mysteriously redirected him, he would have been directly in that spill zone when the accident happened. He looked at the statue, her serene expression unchanged in the dashboard lights. The blanket had slipped slightly, revealing her painted hands folded in prayer. Miguel had driven trucks for over 2 decades. He knew coincidence from divine intervention. This was not coincidence. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory, words he had not thought of in 15 years. Nossa Senora protects those who carry her, Mijo, even when they do not believe. Miguel pulled into a rest stop as dawn broke over the Texas hills, the statue still radiating its impossible warmth beside him. He had not slept, could not sleep, with memories flooding back like water through a broken dam. Isabella, his daughter's name, felt foreign on his lips after 5 years of silence. She had been 7 when the drunk driver ran the red light. 7 when Miguel's world shattered into a million pieces that could never be reassembled. Elena had clutched their daughter's broken body in the hospital, sobbing prayers to the same Virgin Mary that now sat wrapped in his passenger seat. Where was God? Miguel had screamed at Father Mendoza during Isabella's funeral. Where was your merciful Virgin when my baby needed her? The priest had offered empty words about divine plans and mysterious ways. Miguel had walked out of St. Joseph's that day and never returned. Elena kept going to Mass, kept lighting candles, kept believing in a God who had stolen their child. The faith that had once united them became a chasm neither could cross. Within a year, Elena had moved back to her mother's house. Miguel took to the road, driving 18-wheelers across the country, running from grief and guilt and the accusation in his wife's eyes. Not accusation of him, but of the God she still loved despite everything. Now this statue sat in his cab. This same Virgin Mary Elena still prayed to every night. Miguel reached out tentatively, his calloused fingers touching the painted wood. The warmth intensified, spreading up his arm like liquid sunlight. For the first time in 5 years, Miguel Santos wept. The town of Cedar Springs appeared like a mirage as Miguel crested the hill on Highway 21. Population 3,847 according to the weathered sign, but the division was visible immediately. On the west side stood St. Anthony's Catholic Church, its adobe walls and bell tower gleaming in the morning sun. On the east side, New Hope Baptist Church displayed a modern glass facade and digital message board. Between them sat an empty lot where a community center had burned down 6 months earlier, leaving only a concrete foundation and bitter accusations about who was responsible for the fire. Miguel parked his rig at Murphy's Diner, the only neutral ground in a town split down religious lines. Inside, conversations died as he entered, the statue wrapped in his arms. He had intended to find the Catholic Church, to leave Our Lady with people who would understand her significance. "That's her," whispered an elderly Hispanic woman, crossing herself. "Nossa Senora de Aparecida. I haven't seen her in 20 years. A younger man in a Baptist church shirt scoffed. "It's just cardwood, Rosa. Don't start with your superstitions." Rosa Martinez stood slowly, her weathered face radiant. "My grandmother brought that statue from Brazil in 1952. It was stolen from St. Anthony's last month during the break-in." The Baptist man, whose name tag read Deacon Williams, shook his head. "Convenient story. Probably planning to claim insurance money." Miguel set the statue on an empty table, unwrapping her carefully. The warmth had not diminished, and in the diner's fluorescent lighting, her dark wooden face seemed almost luminous. "She was in an accident scene," Miguel said quietly. "Highway 35, north of Austin. I just brought her here." Rosa approached reverently, tears streaming down her cheeks. She came home. Within an hour, both churches had sent delegations to Murphy's Diner. Father Rodriguez arrived first, his black cassock dusty from hurrying across town. Behind him came 3 parishioners, including Rosa's son Carlos, all speaking rapid Spanish as they approached the statue. "This belongs to St. Anthony's," Father Rodriguez declared, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in the priesthood. "She was stolen from our sanctuary." Pastor Williams from New Hope Baptist pushed through the diner's door 5 minutes later, followed by Deacon Mitchell and 2 other church members. "Hold on there, Father. This man found that statue on public property. Finders keepers under Texas law. Miguel watched the confrontation with growing disgust. These people cared nothing for the statue herself, only for what owning her represented in their petty territorial war. He had seen the same ugliness in his own church after Isabella died, the way people used faith as a weapon instead of comfort. "You people burned down our community center," accused Carlos Martinez, pointing at the Baptists. "That's a lie," Deacon Mitchell shot back. "Your people did it for the insurance money." "Enough." Miguel's voice cut through the arguments like a blade. He rewrapped the statue carefully, ignoring the protests from both sides. "She doesn't belong to any of you." Father Rodriguez stepped forward. "Son, you don't understand the significance." "I understand perfectly," Miguel said, tucking the bundle under his arm. "You're fighting over a piece of wood while your town falls apart. Isabella was right to keep me away from places like this." He meant Elena, but the name that came out surprised him. Miguel pushed past both groups and walked toward his truck, the statue warm against his chest. Miguel had driven only 3 blocks when Rosa Martinez appeared in his rearview mirror, running despite her 70-year-old legs. He pulled over as she reached the passenger door, gasping for breath. "Please," she wheezed, climbing into the cab without invitation. "Don't take her away." "Not yet." Before Miguel could protest, Rosa reached toward the statue. The moment her arthritic fingers touched the blanket, her face transformed. The pain lines smoothed away, her breathing steadied, and she straightened in the seat as if decades had melted from her bones. "Dios mío," she whispered, flexing fingers that had been gnarled with arthritis that morning. "She heals." Word spread through Cedar Springs like wildfire. By afternoon, a crowd had gathered around Miguel's truck in the diner parking lot. Mrs. Patterson from New Hope Baptist brought her diabetic grandson, his blood sugar mysteriously normalizing after touching the statue's base. Father Rodriguez arrived with old Manuel Santos, whose cataracts cleared after kneeling beside the truck for 10 minutes. Both churches claimed the miracles as validation of their faith. Catholics pointed to the Virgin Mary's obvious divine power. Protestants insisted God was working through their prayers, using the statue as a mere conduit. The arguments grew louder, more bitter, as each healing deepened the divide. Miguel sat in his cab, watching the chaos, the statue radiating warmth between him and the gathering crowd. People pressed against his windows, reaching desperately for a touch of the miraculous. Children cried. Adults shouted. 2 faiths that should have united in wonder instead weaponized divine grace against each other. This was exactly why he had walked away from God 5 years ago. Miguel started his engine at midnight, desperate to escape the madness consuming Cedar Springs. The crowd had finally dispersed after Sheriff Martinez threatened arrests, but both churches had posted guards in the diner parking lot. Catholics on one side, Baptists on the other, watching his truck like vultures. He pulled on a Highway 21, heading east toward Houston and his scheduled delivery. The statue sat silent beside him, her warmth barely noticeable now, as if she too was exhausted by the day's events. 5 miles outside town, the engine died. Miguel coasted to the shoulder, hazard lights blinking in the darkness. The truck had run perfectly for 300,000 miles, but now nothing worked. No electrical power, no radio. Even his cell phone was dead. He tried the ignition repeatedly, cursing in English and Spanish. Nothing. The silence pressed against him like a physical weight, broken only by his own ragged breathing. "What do you want from me?" he shouted at the statue, his voice echoing in the cab's darkness. "I brought you home. I watched your miracles divide people instead of healing them. What more?" The statue remained motionless, but Miguel felt her presence intensify. Not warmth now, but something deeper. A pulling sensation in his chest, drawing him back towards Cedar Springs and the mess he had tried to abandon. His phone suddenly blazed to life, displaying Elena's number. She had not called him in 2 years, but now her contact photo filled the screen. Isabella's mother, still beautiful, still faithful, still lighting candles for their dead daughter every Sunday. Miguel's hand trembled as he reached for the phone. Miguel never answered Elena's call. Instead, he turned his truck around and drove back to Cedar Springs on 3 cylinders, the engine coughing like a dying man. Something was pulling him toward the town square, toward a commotion he could see from half a mile away. Emergency vehicles surrounded New Hope Baptist Church, their red and blue lights painting the night in urgent colors. Miguel parked and pushed through the gathering crowd, the statue clutched against his chest. "It's Pastor William's granddaughter," Rosa Martinez whispered, appearing at his elbow. "Little Sarah. She fell from the church bell tower during youth group. Paramedics say her spine is severed." The 80-year-old girl lay motionless on a stretcher, her blonde hair matted with blood. Pastor Williams knelt beside her, his face gray with anguish. "Please, God, please don't take her. She's all we have left after her parents died." Miguel stared at the broken child and saw Isabella's face superimposed over Sarah's features. The same age, the same stillness, the same desperate prayers rising from shattered hearts. Without thinking, Miguel unwrapped the statue and placed it gently on Sarah's chest. "If you're real," he whispered to Our Lady of Aparecida, "if any of this means anything, help her." The statue's warmth flared like ignited gasoline. Sarah's eyes fluttered open, and she sat up slowly, the blood disappearing from her hair as if it had never been there. She looked around with perfect clarity and smiled. "Grandpa, why is everyone crying? And why does that pretty lady in blue keep whispering that everything will be okay?" Both congregations fell to their knees simultaneously, Catholic and Protestant alike. Miguel found himself alone in St. Anthony's Chapel at 3 a.m, the statue placed reverently on the altar where she belonged. The healings had stopped the religious warfare, but started something deeper in his chest, a reckoning he had avoided for 5 years. "I blamed you," he whispered to the silent church. "I blamed Elena's God for taking Isabella. But it wasn't God driving drunk that night, was it?" The statue's face seemed to shift in the candlelight, her expression infinitely compassionate. Miguel sank into the front pew, his calloused hands covering his face. "I was supposed to pick her up from dance class. Elena asked me to get Isabella because she was working late at the hospital, but I had a load to Denver, good money, and I told Elena to find another ride." The words came like blood from a wound, finally spoken after years of silence. "If I had been there, if I had picked up my daughter like I was supposed to, she would never have been in that intersection. Mrs. Rodriguez wouldn't have had to drive her. Isabella would be 13 now, arguing about boyfriends and borrowing Elena's lipstick." Miguel looked up at Our Lady of Aparecida, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "I killed my own daughter with selfishness and pride. Then I blamed you for my sins. I drove Elena away because seeing her faith reminded me of my failure. I chose money over my baby girl." The statue's warmth enveloped him like his grandmother's embrace, and for the first time in 5 years, Miguel Santos prayed, "Forgive me, Nossa Senora. Help me find my way back to Elena. Help me learn to forgive myself." Dawn broke over Cedar Springs to find an extraordinary sight. Catholics and Protestants worked side by side in the empty lot between their churches, breaking ground for a new community center. Pastor Williams wielded a sledgehammer beside Father Rodriguez, while Rosa Martinez directed volunteers from both congregations with the authority of a general. "Nossa Senora brought us together," Rosa explained to Miguel as he emerged from the chapel. "After what we witnessed last night, how can we remain divided? Sarah's healing was meant for all of us." Miguel nodded, but his attention focused on the woman walking across the square. Elena Santos moved with the same grace he remembered from 23 years of marriage, her dark hair now touched with silver, her face lined with grief he had caused. She had driven through the night from San Antonio after his phone call. They met in the shadow of the new construction, 5 years of silence stretching between them like an ocean. Elena's eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "I never blamed you, Miguel. I blamed myself for working late that night, for not picking up Isabella myself, for not being the mother she deserved." Miguel reached for her hands, finding them warm despite the morning chill. "We both failed her, but I failed you too, Elena. I let my guilt destroy our marriage. I ran away instead of grieving with you." Elena stepped closer, touching his weathered face with fingers that still wore her wedding ring. "Our Lady brought you back to me, didn't she? Just like she brought peace to this town." Behind them, Protestant and Catholic children played together while their parents planned a shared future, all divisions healed by witnessing the impossible together. 6 months later, Miguel Santos stood before the completed Unity Community Center, its dedication plaque reading, "In memory of Isabella Santos and all children who unite us in love." Elena squeezed his hand as both congregations gathered for the blessing ceremony. The statue of Our Lady of Aparecida occupied a place of honor in the center's chapel, accessible to all faiths. Her wooden face bore the same serene expression, but Miguel now understood the love behind her silence. She had never stopped protecting, never stopped healing. She had simply waited for hearts to open. Miguel had sold his truck and settled in Cedar Springs, working as a mechanic while he and Elena rebuilt their marriage day by patient day. They attended both churches now, finding God in the unity that transcended denominational walls. Their grief over Isabella remained, but it had transformed from bitter accusation into grateful memory. Pastor Williams and Father Rodriguez had become close friends, their shared witness of the miraculous creating bonds stronger than theological differences. Little Sarah Williams, perfectly healthy, served as an altar girl at St. Anthony's and sang in New Hope's children's choir, her presence a living reminder of grace. Rosa Martinez, her arthritis permanently healed, had become the town's unofficial historian, documenting every miracle that had flowed from that stormy night when a broken trucker carried a broken statue home. Miguel looked up at Our Lady of Aparecida one last time before the ceremony began, whispering a prayer of thanksgiving. She had taught him that miracles were not magic tricks to demand from heaven, but love made visible when human hearts finally opened wide enough to receive it. Have you ever witnessed something that science couldn't explain? Share your story in the comments below, and let us know if you've experienced moments where the impossible became possible.